So while we may all know that Kevin Durant is a two-time finals MVP, well, after he jumped ship and joined a team that won 73 games just the year before and he blew a 3-1 lead to, and is one of the most skilled scorers in NBA history, his weaknesses are on full display right now. I wouldn't exactly say that they're being exposed because these weaknesses have existed before and teams have taken advantage of them before, but I just think that they're more on full display than ever before. We're seeing it's pretty crystal clear why he needed to jump ship to join a once homegrown, really well-structured Warriors team into a super team to win a championship, so let's talk about it. Now, while I am amazed at the fact that Kevin Durant has been able to come back from an Achilles tear and still play at an all-star level and still be in the conversation for best player in the world, well, he's definitely not the best player in the world based on how he's played in these 3 games against the Celtics, but he's definitely been in the discussion leading up to this series for sure. And I do understand that at 33 years old, it is hard to be as durable as he once was. However, his weaknesses, like I said, are on full display, and these weaknesses that I'm going to talk about in this video go back to the very early days of his career. And well, yes, Russell Westbrook has his weaknesses too, and while Scott Brooks is a bad head coach that OKC was a contender in spite of, no, it wasn't all their fault. KD had his own faults too, even as the best player on the team. Now, before we continue, if you could please consider dropping a like for the YouTube algorithm. If you do enjoy the content, subscribing and turning on post notifications to never miss another video. Your support is much appreciated. Now, what I'm about to talk about is how he tends to struggle against physicality and also doesn't have counters for everything. This series against the Celtics is not at all the first time KD has had a hard time handling physicality. It's just the only time we've ever seen him play this poorly against it. Now, I do have to give the Celtics credit for having such a great defense. However, there's no excuse for Kevin Durant to shoot the ball just 11 times in a must-win game. So what about efficiency? How does being efficient feel when down 3-0? You're the best player on the team. You have to have the mindset of, I'm going to chuck in this game and I'm going to live with the results, grab the game by the throat. Have that mindset before the game even begins, before the opening tip, that you're going to shoot at least 20 times. Even when Kevin Durant was drafted, his really skinny frame was a concern, and that was the reason the Blazers, while not knowing Greg Oden would be so derailed by injuries, drafted Oden instead of Durant with the first overall pick. Kevin Durant never liked physicality. Although he is highly skilled, he can handle the ball, he can stop on a dime and pull up from mid-range or 3. His length as a 7-footer does allow him to shoot over defenders. He's never been able to take physicality like Michael Jordan or Kobe. He just doesn't have the strength to do it. Michael Jordan and Kobe embraced physicality. Kevin Durant just can't take it very well. Michael Jordan and Kobe were both great post players, not just because of their footwork, but because they embraced physicality. We can even go back to Kevin Durant's very first playoff game, when back then Ron Artest, who we eventually knew as Meta World Peace, now Meta Sandiford Artest, was harassing him, and KD didn't even shoot 30% in that game. For all you efficiency nerds, for that whole series, he was only efficient in game 4 on just 12 shots, but okay, the Thunder did blow the Lakers out in that game. Still though, him struggling against physicality goes all the way back to when he was still very young, and it didn't just stop there. Now he's in his 15th year in the league, well, 14th that he's actually played because he missed a whole season with an Achilles tear, and this is still a problem with him to this day. Now, my man Dime Dropper was talking about this on his Twitter account. Check him out if you don't know of him. I'll leave his Twitter thread on this in the description, as well as a link to his channel in the description. Of course, I have to give some credit too, so that I'm not stealing. We can go back to when he blew a 3-1 lead against the Warriors. Sure, we can go back to the years in between 2010 and when he blew a 3-1 lead, since he didn't win a ring, but maybe only a little bit. We can discuss that more in the comments because I don't remember those as thoroughly, but I do know in 2013 against the grit and grind Grizzlies, when KD had to go against them without Russell Westbrook, KD put up an impressive 32 points per game, but he was a brick machine in the deciding game. In those last 2 games, at least KD did shoot the ball over 20 times, unlike in this game 3, but the Grizzlies' grit and grind definitely got him off his game. 2014, I do remember that game 6 OKC lost to the Spurs in the conference finals when KD wasn't being nearly demanding enough and Russ was playing hero ball, and it actually worked for a good part of the game until Russ missed his last 3 shots, including an ill-advised 3 at the end. This goes back to doing too much of letting the game come to you, especially in a must-win game. When the Thunder blew that 3-1 lead to the Warriors, yeah, Russ had his faults too in that series, as always, but I also won't be a salty Lakers fan here. KD was just as much, if not more, at fault than Russell Westbrook was for blowing that 3-1 lead. Where was KD's counter when the Warriors loaded up on him at the top and sagged off guys like Anthony Roberson, who we knew couldn't throw the ball in the ocean if it was right in front of him? You need counters to everything, and KD just doesn't have that. And then, as we know, he jumped ship and took the easy way out to win his championships. Even in the 2019 series against the Clippers, well, yes, Patrick Beverley is an excellent defender, don't get me wrong. He should have no business of even guarding Kevin Durant, with Kevin Durant being nearly a foot taller than him, let alone Patrick Beverley getting him off his game. Now, stat watchers may be saying, oh, but KD averaged 35 points per game. What happened in game 2? KD only shot the ball 8 times and turned the ball over 9 times. More turnovers than shot attempts. That's inexcusable for a generational talent like KD. Now, KD did have a great series as a whole, but if he just didn't let physicality bother him, he easily would have been a lot better. KD may have also scored 45 in game 5, and while that is impressive, he also went cold in the 4th quarter of that game. Backtracking a little bit, so when Kevin Durant did win his 2 championships, no, he wasn't the clear-cut best player on the team. I don't care about Finals MVP for this argument, because Andre Iguodala was obviously never the best player on any Warriors team he played for. Kawhi was not the best player on the Spurs yet when he won Finals MVP. James Worthy was never the best player on any team he ever played on, and he won Finals MVP. I'm not saying Steph definitely was better than KD, but the argument can definitely be made. Either way, point is, Kevin Durant never won a championship as the consensus best player on his team, and was fortunate enough to be on such a stacked team with no egos. Because defenses had to worry so much about the Splash Brothers, this is such an easy way to create mismatches when teams didn't want to play the pick and roll straight up. The Cavs had Kevin Love switching on to Kevin Durant in the finals because they had to worry so much about the Splash Brothers, and KD had rim runs to the basket. Michael Jordan and Kobe would easily score 40 points per game in those situations. This series right now against the Celtics, game 2 where KD went 0 for 10 in the second half, the Celtics knew exactly how to handle him by getting physical with him and not letting him catch the ball cleanly. They know where he likes to pick up the ball, and him starting his shooting motion with the ball low has made it not as easy as people like to think it is for him to shoot over smaller defenders. Yes, KD is capable of doing that, but not as easily as some people think, because he does start his motion so low, and that makes the ball easier to strip for smaller guards. I understand he has to dribble the ball higher because of his height, and that gives smaller guards an advantage to take the ball from him. Well, that's why Magic Johnson turned his back to protect the ball. I understand Magic turned the ball over more, but this was with much less spacing and more physical defenses, so yeah, obviously. Game 3, yeah, only 11 shots in a must-win game. Yeah, he was efficient. Yeah, he shot 54.5%, but you lost, that's what matters, so your percentage. So I will conclude by saying that no, he is not nearly as good of a scorer as some of you Gen Z bots claim. No, he's not a better scorer than Kobe, not even close. Oh, but he's more efficient. If that's your end-all be-all argument, you already lost. That means nothing without context. I already destroyed that argument in a video I made last year, so I'll leave that in the end screen. But one thing I didn't say back then, well, I'll say it now because it was just said to me, and this is so casual. You don't remember the Pistons or the Celtics against Kobe? Yes, I do. I was 10 years old in 2004 and 14 in 2008. 2004, yes, that's definitely a stain on Kobe's legacy, but it was not because he was unable to handle physicality. He got greedy, and yes, that cost the Lakers, but he at least never looked defeated like KD does now in that finals. And also, if it weren't for Kobe's game winner in game 2 of that series, the Lakers would have been swept. 2008, Pau Gasol was definitely more at fault than Kobe, and I love Pau Gasol, but Pau Gasol was the one who couldn't handle physicality back then, and Kobe had to toughen him up for them to win those back-to-back championships following the 2008 loss. Now, this is being recorded after Game 3, so if the Nets are able to avoid a sweep and KD has a historic performance, okay, KD deserves his props, but him not being able to handle physicality very well with the stakes being higher has always been a thing, and it's more on full display than ever before in this series. Last year, Kevin Durant was phenomenal in a losing effort. He still lost. That's what matters the most, even with his co-stars injured. If he really was that great, he should be able to get them over the top even with his co-stars hurt. With all this said though, Kevin Durant is still one of the greatest players of all time. In the years I've watched basketball, which is since 2001, I'd say KD is top 10. All time, maybe top 20. Definitely top 30. No way top 15 though. Kevin Durant is definitely one of the greatest scorers of all time, but his weaknesses have been exploited before, and they are now more than ever. I understand he's 33 and he did tear his Achilles tendon just a little less than 3 years ago, but not being able to handle physicality at the level an all-time great should be able to, especially at 7 feet tall, has absolutely held him back. Just to be clear though, it's not entirely KD's fault that Brooklyn is down 3-0, as Kyrie isn't playing well either and Steve Nash just isn't a good coach. I gave Steve Nash the benefit of the doubt last year, being a new coach with multiple roster changes, but this year we can see he's just not a good coach with his small guards lineups. But even with Kyrie and Steve Nash's problems, Kevin Durant is the one being talked about with the greatest players of all time, so this conversation needed to happen. And if he struggles against today's physicality, imagine what his life on the court would have been in the 80s and 90s or even the early 2000s. So that's all I got in this video. Please be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it and consider subscribing and turning on notifications to never miss another video. Links to my social media are down in the description. And once again, thank you so much for 1,000 subscribers. It was a long and tough road to get here, but finally did it. And I can't thank you guys enough for the continued support. But also let me know in the comments if there is anything I missed about KD's career that also proves my point. If you just want to call me a hater in the comments, feel free to just tell me in the comments that you have very thin skin. Also, if you want to click through either of these videos up above, if you haven't seen either of these yet, I'm sure you'll enjoy them, and I'd definitely appreciate it if you do click through one or the other. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you next time. Peace.